Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast. Now, today's episode is going to be probably not what you'd be expecting. You'll see the title and you'll be intrigued, I'm sure. Now, we moved to Thailand and got an education visa with two of the guests today. So, Jamie and Sakan are from the combat school that we actually enlisted with, and that secured our visa for the first year. So, we started going to combat school, and I was very intrigued because I've never, ever done anything like this before. Matt's obviously done it before. And the sort of ethos behind it, from Matt's point of view, is it's going to be really good for you to learn self-defense. Now, for me, I didn't really appreciate what that could offer me, but getting some general fitness, trying something different, etc., etc. Jamie and Sakan know what happened, so I'll give a bit of an overview, but thank you first of all for coming on today, guys.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So it's hard to put it in a nutshell, isn't it? Being in Thailand, it's a different country, right? So we've moved about a bit and been in different areas in Chiang Mai, and I've just always, as a bodybuilder, gone out for walks to get steps, every day for the last 12 years. So it's something that I do on autopilot. Now, the timeline of this, we actually did a session with you, Jamie, where we were talking about the awareness when you go out for a walk. And it's certainly something that many of the listeners are probably going to go, what do you mean awareness when you go out for a walk? And I went out for steps one Saturday evening because Matt was on a call, and went down my normal route, but I, in essence, got attacked. I find it quite hard because I don't want to be like, I said to you, didn't I, Jamie? I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but it actually was an attack. And for a while, it took me, that first week, it was like, did that really happen? And of course, you've really empowered me to, continue looking into it and doing something about it. Hence why we're doing the pod. And what happened essentially was the guy was out on a moped. He was going the wrong direction on a one-way street. And I straight away, it was like, what's this guy doing? And it's Saturday night, maybe, had a drink or whatever. And then came back, looped back towards me, going the right direction. So as we'd had this talk with you, I was alert. And then he turned back around and came past me. And I thought, this is getting a little bit weird. And I don't have any network on my phone because Matt has the internet on his. So I was just sort of like, don't really know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to stay alert. So I carried on walking, and when he doubled back, he came from the middle of the road with the moped still running across to me. Like within a split second, he was next to me and did this sort of snarl, as in to sort of gesture almost. And I looked away and I didn't really know what to do. I just didn't want to engage. And that's when he put his hand out, scratched down my chest, pulled my dress down, and as you know, Jamie, I didn't have a bra on, so I was completely exposed in the middle of the road. The moped was still running, and he drove off, and it was just like, what the hell has just happened? Within a split second. Now, Matt and I have spoken about it since, and actually, I guess the tactic would have been to maybe back up and put my hand out to gesture to stop. So, I guess from your guys' point of view, it'd be interesting to maybe dig into that sort of where you said about being on, you can be like green, amber, red, and the different alert processes you talk about. And the title of the podcast is Should Everyone Learn Self-Defense? So we can go on plenty of tangents here, as you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you want to dive in at this point, man? All right. Let's do it. So first thing, I think that the title of the podcast is absolutely appropriate, that everybody should learn self-defense, 100%. We see it a lot with the people that come to us, who come to learn, that, the vast majority of people just don't do that. Or, most people, at least that we work with, you find that they don't put too much thought to what could happen. It's more kind of like mental avoidance, right? Like, I don't really want to think about that because it's an unpleasant thing to think about. And also, we as human beings, I'll get into this a little bit, we will make conclusions, kind of subconscious conclusions to ourselves, based on kind of repetition or habit, right? So the problem that we have these days as people is that, in civilization, in general, day to day, we feel as though that we're quite safe. In most places anyway, where there's a legal system and there's civility, and we're not back in the caveman days, watching out for lions and tigers and bears, right? So it's a little bit different. So what can tend to happen with people then is there's a complacency that sets in via doing the same things over and over, and there's never been any kind of adversity or any kind of problems with that, and thus the brain will come to a conclusion that you're safe. So things like going for walks. I like to go for walks. Okay, well, when you go on the walks and nothing is happening, to you when you're on those walks, your brain comes to the conclusion that, oh, I'm safe, everything's okay. Coupled with other external factors like maybe lack of training that most people have when they're being raised. I mean, we get stranger danger training, right, which is not very good at all, and it's been proven not to work. Or we would get this kind of advice, which is arguably kind of a cop-out, where, oh, if anything happens, I'll just call the police, or I'll just run away. And then they'll stop their thought process at that conclusion and not really think it through of, if something were to happen, what does that option truly look like, and how do I get there, and is it realistic? When it comes to the self-defense thing, what we tend to say is that, yes, everybody has to be aware. Everybody has to be really learning to look after themselves. But where it all starts, as you pointed out in the introduction, there is awareness. And it really is awareness. It should be, if anything, the first thing that people should be looking at is to be aware and how to utilize that awareness to keep yourself safe. And with that, you mentioned the code system, and an example of what we would do here is what we call the Cooper's Codes, which is a system that was put together by Colonel Jeff Cooper of the US Airborne, where he was putting it together for military application in terms of keeping yourself safe in hostile environments, how to be aware and how to identify danger, and with that, how to prevent it, avoid it, or engage, escape, or whatever you need to do. And we adopt that model right from the beginning, because we find that if people have that awareness, then they're almost halfway there with their self-defense, Do you want to dive on that point, man?
Yeah.
I'm going to ramble away.
Spot on, talking about how people are willfully aware and they take things for granted. Even fighters, even people who have trained fighting skills like myself, martial artists, combat sports athletes, just because they know they can fight doesn't mean it will translate in a self-defense scenario. So this is a really good place to start with, is street smarts and application of what we call soft skills.
Yeah, for sure. I think as well, like you say there, it's almost, you do take it for granted until something happens. So like anything in life, for sure, until something actually happens to you, you maybe don't appreciate it. Or if it happens to maybe someone that's very close to you, you can sort of relate to it. And Matt's been attacked in the past, when he was younger, etc. And so he's always had this as importance. And it wasn't until this happened to me that it's like, I've had conflict in life, but it's been with people that I know. I've never had, like a stranger. And you mentioned like stranger danger. That's pretty much all we would ever know. And actually, I'd like to sort of pick your brains around the processing time I had and how I've sort of come to this point where I'm able to talk about it quite soon after. I think for me, being able to go back with Matt to where it happened and actually walking down that street a few times, talking to yourself, Jamie, and, you've actually looked into it from the police side of you for me and this type of thing, that's actually really helped me to process it and actually realize that it was an attack. I don't need to, dumb it down and think, oh, I won't say anything. And I think potentially there could be someone listening that maybe this has happened to, and maybe they haven't come forward or they don't know what to do. So yeah, I guess the different stages that we could go through mindset wise to deal with something like this if it does happen.
No, that's a very good point. And that's the thing, is that, it's traumatic. Any kind of altercation, even if it's minor, even if you may walk away not feeling too kind of upset about it, it does make an impact, it will leave an imprint on you, even if it's a small altercation, right? Because, whether you like it or not, you will be activated, kind of fight or flight kicks in a little bit, the butterflies in the tummy and everything like that. But then, of course, if you get to the more severe examples, what happened to yourself, or even more severe than what happened with yourself, they're all relevant, of course. They are traumatic, and they're traumatic because they are so unfamiliar and so shocking that it just rattles you. And it really doesn't matter who you are as a person. It's a basic human response. If something's coming, like in your case, where something was happening that I'm sure you felt it in your gut or your heart, or however you'd like to say it, where it's like something doesn't feel right, and then all of a sudden, bang, it's there. At that moment, again, it doesn't matter who you are. The only thing that matters is what is your experience that you have in your memory bank at that moment, right? In other words, have you been there before? Right. So, or is anything like that happen similar? And it transcends way beyond anything like mental toughness, physical toughness, and things like this, because at that moment, shock is shock, right? Mental overload is mental overload. And that physical response you get when you've been shocked and threatened that way, it's very, very real. And for many people, even like athletes, even professional athletes as well, at times, it's so unfamiliar, because it's a totally different feeling to anything else you might feel in competition, even if it is, a combat competition, right? So in terms of dealing with it, I would say that it's a case of allowing yourself to process the emotions and not suppressing them, right? Kind of not so much kind of looking it dead in the eye at the beginning, but at the same, it's basically just kind of accepting what's happens, allowing yourself to analyze it without any kind of self-blame, or that hindsight, I should have done this, I could have done that. That's the big one, right? It'll rattle around in people's heads, but the fact of the matter is, it was such an unexpected thing. It came out of nowhere, right? And you just responded on instinct. And that's the thing, is that unless a person has had some kind of training or exposure of some sort to a situation like that, they will never ever respond in the way that they think they would when they have kind of thinking about it in a calm environment where they're not being actively attacked. If they have to kind of process, what would I do in that situation? It never ever matches what actually happens when you're in that situation, unless you've been trained for it, in which case you'll find that you may have a better measure of control on the situation. You might be able to process it better because you've got something to draw on, as opposed to the majority of people that just don't have that level of experience. What do you think about that, man?
Yeah, I just wanted to first say that, Sarah, I think you have a really brave and healthy attitude towards the whole situation, being able to come and talk about it freely on the podcast, and also talk to us freely about it as well. Because
thank you.
This is a very scary scenario that you did encounter, but I'm really happy to hear that you came out, safe and relatively unharmed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was certainly, when I said to Matt, one of the first things he said was, you were going for a walk and you didn't do anything wrong, and that really stuck. And then of course, when we were messaging Jamie and you said, you've been attacked, let's see what we can do to pursue this and see if there's CCTV, etc. And that almost, I said to you, Jamie, it almost gave like validity. And I think sometimes if something happens to you, and you guys may have come across this before when speaking with people that it has happened to, if someone is assaulted, is there an element of, I won't say anything because people might not believe me? Because that certainly went through my mind, because if people questioned it close to you, what would you then do? And there's lots of instances, I'd imagine, people listening, in all walks of life, that are going to go, this happened to me, it wasn't right, but I didn't say anything because I didn't know if anyone would believe me. And you said earlier, Jamie, about going to the police, you never know if that's going to get followed up, because is there enough evidence, etc., etc. And then I guess if people are in this scenario, it's like, if this was something 10 years ago, how will we then process it then? I've been lucky enough to have your guys' support and Matt's support and people around me, but it's like, if you didn't have the courage then, and you may be listening and it sparked something that happened years ago, I don't know if there's sort of thought processes as to what someone could do there.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very tough one to handle, because again, unfamiliarity of a situation like this, it's very tricky to process it. And I find, at least in my experience working with people, maybe my own personal experiences as well, is that one big factor is people may have a lot of kind of self-doubt on processing the situation or trying to interpret the situation, where sometimes what can happen is, this is what I call, I teach this a lot in our self-defense class here, but I talk about the toss-up between the thinking brain and the feeling brain. Okay, so what can happen is, if something like this happens, we as people often get lost in our thinking brain, right? In other words, it's full of questions and it's full of doubt and wonder, right? Did I get that wrong? Did I kind of invite this in some way? Maybe I overreacted or underreacted, or, it's these thoughts that rattle on in the head. And that can literally paralyze someone on the spot, where they just get stuck in a loop of, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know if it's the right thing to talk to someone. Say if they feel as though I should go to the police, but I don't want to burden the police. I don't know if they're going to do anything. All of this stuff, it rattles around in the head, right? Now, but here's the thing, though. This is where, again, comparison between what I would call thinking and feeling brain is that often your gut will tell you the truth of what you feel and what you really should do. And this is something that I talk about in classes as well, is about setting boundaries in advance, which is obviously something that's difficult to do in hindsight if something's already happened, but you can obviously set those boundaries for future. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but to prevent future occurrences, right? And it's a case of, okay, deep down, regardless of anything else or anyone else, what do I feel really? Am I happy with what happened? In like in your case, if you can truly hand it out, say to yourself that, do you know what? Yeah, I did that. I brought him on and I antagonized him and I made him do that, right? That's something you're going to feel. And me saying that to you, I'm sure right now in your feeling, you're saying, hell no, that is not how it went down, right?
Yeah.
There lies the truth. Okay, there lies the truth. So I think that's very hard to do, because it's like the little demon on the shoulder. It's always whispering in your ear. But again, gut feeling is what trumps it, And it's the same, and forgive me for bringing it up again, Sarah, but going on the conversation that you and I had about what happened with yourself, I'm going to, for a second, just refer to maybe the feeling and the thinking that you had at the moment that the guy was going past you on the motorcycle, right? Where in your minds, I'm sure it was racing with possibilities and what ifs, whereas your gut was saying to you, this don't feel right, you see? And that's the thing. It's like, okay, if we can learn to go more into our heart or gut, but then understand, okay, based on that feeling, what kind of action plan should I have if something were to occur? That's the trick. And that's what a lot of people, I'm going to argue most people, they just don't have that. They don't have that connection. They don't have that training, unfortunately. It's quite scary.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting what you said, Sakan, about like, even when you're a professional athlete, a professional fighter, I wonder if that's similar to, my instance where I've had physical abuse before, emotional abuse, etc., with someone that I know and most of the time trusted. And this was someone that I didn't know. I wonder if, when you go into a professional fight, you sort of know what's coming, if that makes sense. And maybe that's where, like you said, if you're on the street and something was to happen and you need to protect yourself in a different environment, maybe that's a similar thought process.
The biggest difference between like an amateur or professional fight is there's this time gap, and within the time gap you have this idea, okay, I'm going to face this other trained fighter or killer, and it's going to be really hard. And so you kind of like imagine all these things. What are they doing? What's they training? What are they preparing for? And you have all this time to doubt yourself and also pull out. However, when it comes to an emergency self-defense scenario where you're faced with a person you've never met before, you don't know, you can't really process how you're feeling in front of them, the nerves and the adrenaline, and you don't have the time to back out, right? Because I can choose to cancel any time, right? I can back out any way I want. When it comes to this, it's just you don't have that much time to be afraid either. You just dealt with the scenario, and it's just use whatever tools you have to problem solve. And the problem with that is usually you come up with the worst tools available. So it's, some essence, in essence, it can be good or it can be bad. Depends how much overall training you've had, and also what kind of conversations, like Jamie said, you've had in the past. Like, what kind of boundaries am I going to make if I run into this sort of situation? So yeah,
for sure. It's really interesting actually, because we could probably talk about, based on, we've spoken about sort of what attackers would look for before in class, and how you're putting yourself across and how to look at other people in an environment. And when me and Matt sort of ran through it, I laughed there, because I'm female, which could be, a factor. Had a dress on, which again could be a factor. It wasn't, necessarily revealing, but it was, straps were down and it was easy for him to put it down. I also had a knee brace on, and I just had my phone in my hand. So I guess for someone, again, looking, we could maybe talk about that as well, because, when people are out on a walk when they're in their bodybuilding prep at 4 a.m. because they can't sleep, or late at night because they've got to get their steps in, things like this. Maybe what attackers would maybe look at from a point of vulnerability and you being quite easy to target.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this is kind of the issue when it comes to your self-protection, right? Because it's a big world. There's so many variables. There's so many things that could happen, right? So the first thing is, I would say that not trying to come up with a battle plan for every potential scenario. I think that's not a good start, because there's too many and it never ever goes the way you think it will go, right? It just doesn't, right? It could be a small thing. It could be that you're training for, let's say you're envisioning a target that looks intimidating to you, and then all of a sudden the target that you actually get, if you have bad luck, isn't what matches in your mind, and that can scramble your brains and things like this. So in terms of what a predator might be looking for, I'm going to focus here for a second on someone who's kind of an opportunistic person, right? So it could potentially or likely someone you don't know, right? So I'm not talking about things like domestic violence or something along those lines, but more kind of the opportunistic thief or anyone of that sort, okay? So there tends to be certain things that, let's call them predators. There's certain things that predators may be looking for in a potential target, right? So let's take a scenario, somebody who is hanging around kind of a populated area, such as a shopping mall or indoor, outdoor, whichever, somewhere where there's a lot of people from all over the place. They're likely there to spend money, right? And they're likely not paying attention very much to their surroundings because they're looking for the shop they're going to and talking to whatever, on the phone or whichever. So there's a few things that an opportunistic thief or attacker of some sort, predator, might be looking for. The biggest one, I would argue, is lack of awareness, which is unfortunately something that most people, I'm not going to say all, but it's not far off, most people are not aware when they're out and about, okay? And the comparison would be this. Say if you're in a car, right? So you're driving a car. I would say that is what we would call a code yellow state of awareness, where you are awake and aware and you're paying attention because you don't want to knock somebody over and you don't want to have an accident. But at the same time, you're not driving with a level of paranoia and, you're not jumpy, like, oh my God, something could happen. It's that level of awareness that really should be adopted at all times by people, but it's just not. When people are on foot, usually, what are they distracted by? Their music, whatever's in their head, their phone, their friends, their destination, whatever it might be. So that lack of awareness, it makes you stand out like a sore thumb, right? Because if someone is looking for a target to, let's say, rob, right, thief, they're looking for an easy target. They're not looking for a challenge. I mean, some may be, but on the most part, no. They're looking for someone who is going to be easy takings, right? Easy pickings. So that's the first main one, is lack of awareness. You're not paying attention. It stands out that you're not paying attention. And thus, if there's someone in the area looking for an opportunity, that's one. Like, there you go. That person's not paying attention. Another thing they could be looking for is if you're alone. Okay. And that's not necessarily just being on your own. That could be that you are in an area that isn't populated or isn't well populated. So it could be a road that doesn't have many eyes on it, not windows and doors, people staying there, busy road or whichever. But again, being alone in a public place is something you need to be aware of as well, because it's not necessarily safety in numbers. If you're in a public place surrounded by people you don't know, you have to be aware of the bystander effect if something were to happen, which is a very real thing that you should concern yourself with. Another thing you need to think of is what I would call perceived weakness, right? Or actual weakness. So things like, if I compare the two, having a physical injury that's going to impede your progress in some way, right? Being unable to run away, for example, or unable to fight, or whatever it might be. That is obviously a physical weakness, right? That they would see. A perceived weakness could be more behavioral, right? On what's going on through your head and how you feel. So, and in this case, it really doesn't matter who you are or what you look like. I mean, you could be someone who's looks imposing, intimidating, and tough. Yeah, if you are personifying kind of what you might call how to say, I'd say a victim persona via your kind of internal body language, being small, keeping your head down, hands in the pockets, hoping nobody sees me. That stands out too, because that shows someone who isn't comfortable in their own skin, who's obviously kind of timid. So that would be, I would say, perceived weakness. So those are three big things that people are looking for, which again, you can work on preventing those things. You know what I mean? You can switch on your awareness, and you can make certain plans in advance to hopefully mitigate these opportunistics, you know? Yeah, I could talk about that one for hours and hours, Sarah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it relates into what we were just talking about with Sakan as well, actually, you know, being a professional fighter. And this relates as well, an extension into bodybuilding, because when we step on stage, when you step into a fight, when you're out in public, you know, perhaps you are alone, because there are times when you're going to be alone. Your whole representation and your persona, when you step on stage as a bodybuilder, people win shows because they have such good stage presence. And you might have someone next to them that maybe slightly tips them on the physique, but actually they've got the stage presence and they're there. And Sakan, you'll probably agree, well, and Jamie, you know, when you go into a fight, professional, amateur, if you're there to win and you're strong in your, you know, what you've learned for that competition, what you're there to bring, you look very different. So then when we transfer that into, you know, when you are out, and I think when you did the talk with us, Jamie, about, you know, we actually went on the street and you said no phones, and then we looked at our phones and did the same. We did a bit of walking per time. And at first it's like, it's going to go through your head, but I go on my phone. I've got, you know, if I've got to pop to the shop, I'm going to be on my phone walking there and whatever else. Again, not until this happened, I'm like, holy shit, I know what Jamie's talking about now. I wonder if there will be, you know, people listening that go, well, you know, I need to have my phone on me all the time, and it will never happen to me. Without it actually happening to them, I don't know what the best way to get that across in that importance. Or, but if they can start to think about it's how you present yourself when you're out in public, that's certainly a good place to start, like you've both said.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very hard to get it through to people, because you find that, again, because it's arguably a rare thing. I mean, it's not, it's a common thing, of course, we know that, but
that's what Matt says.
Right, it is. It's a common thing, but it doesn't feel common to you, right? You know, so to a person, maybe it's never happened before, right, in your whole life, or it hasn't happened since you were a kid, or whatever it might be. So the possibility of it happening is not on the forefront of your mind. You know, it's just not really there. So what often happens is you might have people that just live through life with, you know, forgive me for saying, a level of denial. You know, it's never happened to me, therefore it wouldn't. What I say for that one is, it should be, therefore it is. It shouldn't be, therefore it isn't. It's a mindset that people would have, and it's a really incorrect mindset to have. And getting it through to people, this is the hard part, because again, if they're not relating to it themselves with their own experiences, they might not really put any kind of stock into it. It might be that it could be seeing footage. I hate to say it, but this is something we also do at times. It's showing footage of real world altercations, not movie stuff, which is, you know, on the most part, very unrealistic, right? Even though one's trying to be realistic, it just doesn't work that way on the most part. So if we show footage of real escalated altercations, even if it's just only verbal, sometimes obviously physical, it shocks a lot of people. Like, oh geez, it's shockingly violent, and it's horribly aggressive, and it really surprises people. And sometimes that can be enough to spark the light bulb in people's heads, thinking, I don't want that to happen to me, right? Some people, it just doesn't. It's very, very tricky to get it through. But again, I would say this example, what you're doing here, the fact that you've been through something, you've got people watching you, and you is obviously a powerful person, an athlete yourself, right? In your mind, I mean, I would argue this has been completely fair. You might think that no one's going to mess with me because I'd snap them, you know, because you're a strong person, right? And yet all of a sudden it's there on your doorstep. It's happened. That's a surprise. Hopefully people who are watching this can relate to you, your experience, and see that, damn, this stuff really can and does happen to anybody. But at the same time, it really doesn't take that many steps just to be a bit more thorough with your life in general, day to day, to prevent a lot of these things from happening. It just takes a little bit of work and a bit of planning. It's not that much to it. You don't have to be a professional athlete who can fight anybody to fight these people off, you know?
Yeah, for sure. It's certainly I guess that bringing it into, you know, what you'd maybe think would happen and then it actually happening, that flip of the mindset. And certainly, you know, when it initially happened, it was like I said right at the start, it was within seconds. Now this is often how it comes, right? And you know, when I realized he had gone and he'd cleared onto the main road, I was just like, I've got to run home, and I had the knee sleeve on because my knee was playing up. And as you know, my back's not great. But I thought, actually, if I get home, at least I'm alive. And then that escalation in my own mind as well, because it was on an underpass and there were some homeless people that had been living there, and or, you know, people that sort of set up shop there. Then it's going in my mind and I'm going wild. Well, what if that was him startling me? Then they're going to come out and something else is going to happen and escalate there. The sun's going down, it's getting darker, and all of these things were sort of going through my mind. And like we've touched on, you know, those elements of should I be able to wear a dress up? Should I have had the straps up, but it was really hot, so I had them down? And could I have maybe worn something that was more covered up? And this type of thought process, and back to where we were talking about, you know, do I deserve this? Should this had happened to me? But actually I found that talking about it, getting you guys on today and speaking with you beforehand, perhaps that would give someone else a voice. And if it happened to someone else, that they would maybe have the strength, or it would prevent it happening to them. Of course, like you say, if they're watching, they can go, oh, okay, so this does actually happen. Because I, in a million years, would never have thought this would happen. And also to put you guys as well, when I first started, you know, talking to people and telling them, I haven't told that many people, but Matt told a few people. And there was a couple of, you know, people that said, that's really unlikely that happened. I can't believe that happened. Now, for me, I said to you in one of the voice notes, Jamie, it was like, oh, does that mean people are thinking anything other than it did happen? And it was those elements of like, oh, okay. And that almost played it down in my mind. Obviously you dealt with it, you know, you were so, I could hear the passion in your voice, like you really wanted to help me, again with Matt as well. And that element of self-doubt, then if it is heightened, the first person you tell and they go, well, that's, you know, that shouldn't have happened, you know, that's really rare. What would your advice be to someone that maybe did confide in someone and maybe didn't get the level of support? Because I would say continue to pursue it if possible.
Jump in on that one? Go for it. Okay. Again, it's a really, really tricky one, but there's a few things that I think that a little bit of a reality check on a few points is going to help people dramatically. Okay. So I'll say a few things which I think could help potentially to change mindset on a few different people. The first thing I need to say is get rid of assumption in its entirety when it comes to self-protection. Okay. Now what do I mean by that? Let's give a couple examples. One example would be, don't make any assumptions based on what a target could be in front of you, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say in your mind, and everyone does this, if you ask them to imagine a bad guy, imagine a robber, imagine a thief, a mugger or something like that, they'll have an image in their mind. The real person doesn't look like that. That's the first thing, right? Assumption number one. Yeah. The next thing is, you can't make any assumption on what you're dealing with based on appearance, okay? Based on gender, based on age, size, ethnicity, culture, religious preference, whatever it is, it's no indicator of A, what that person or people may be capable of, and B, what they're intending on doing. All right. So that's the first thing we need to make assumption on is get rid of those assumptions, right? A bad guy looks like this, a good guy looks like that, etc. If they look like this, they'll be like this. You can't do it. You just can't go there. At the end of the day, we haven't got a damn clue about who we're dealing with the people around us. You know, we have to deal with like surface level civility, and that's how much we know about most people around us. So it's getting rid of those assumptions. On that note, I'm going to also say internally as well, is that a lot of people will make an assumption that they are incapable of looking after themselves, and thus they're thinking more of prevention in all and every way. Now, prevention is obviously king when it comes to self-defense. If you can avoid something from happening, preventing it from happening, fair enough. But it goes beyond that. People will live their lives with this kind of this fear, trying to prevent something potentially happening, and then kind of overdoing it, right, a little bit. And what I mean by that is that they might assume that themselves, that if something were to happen to me, I'm done. I can't do anything about it. That's not true either, right? One thing that we've seen, and we see a lot on a daily basis in our school here, is that you can have someone who maybe is small in stature, kind of timid in nature, right? Completely polite and soft, but that doesn't mean that they can't defend themselves. It doesn't mean they can't escape, they can't de-escalate, they can't fight their way out of trouble, okay? Because they can. If you have the physical ability to think and move, then you have just as good a chance as most other people in avoiding, preventing situations, or if it really gets heavy, potentially battling your way out of a situation. So what I'm saying with that is there anybody inside who might be kind of concerned, thinking, God, I need to be fit first. I need to be strong. I need to have this. I need to do that. No, you do not. What you need to do is just kind of start with stepping into the door of somewhere that's going to teach you how to make yourself fitter, and just go for it. Just go with emotions, because you're more capable than you think. The students that we have here prove it on a daily basis. We have elderly, we have people with physical inabilities, all kinds, people who've been through quite traumatic experiences themselves and have decided, you know what, I'm not staying there in that feeling. I'm going to grab life by the nuts, so to speak, and get on, and it's like, I say bravo to them, is there anything you want to add to that?
I was going to ask you, what is your major concern of people not believing you, or questioning your story? I just need a little bit more background information.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that you've asked that, actually. Like you said, Jamie, really good question. And again, for me, there's never any ego, like I love this type of interaction, because I don't really actually, I was trying to actually quantify this myself when, first of all, telling Matt, and on my way home, I was like, I'm going to tell him. And I don't know what, like, it went through my mind, but it wouldn't have ever stopped me actually telling him and us pursuing it, as it were. But I think probably I had those thoughts of, what if someone didn't believe me? And I don't really know where it stemmed from, because I've never
like
been...
wolf kind of feeling, like, are you worried person may not believe me, or this person, they might not trust my story or my credibility?
I know that obviously Matt would never, he would know that it was true. I think probably what actually made it more quantifiable and me actually delve into it more in my head, it went through as a passing thought when I was running home, and I thought, well, obviously I'm going to tell Matt, but I had this thought of maybe other people that have been through things that they've shared with me, and they haven't entrusted anyone, and they haven't sort of, worried about cried wolf, etc. But these first couple of interactions from Matt telling people that, it was like, well, that's, I can't believe that's happened. It's very rare. It almost went in my mind, like, why someone sort of semi-questioned it. And then I was like, well, it's probably maybe because they haven't had this type of experience before. And Matt and I spoke about it and said, he said, it's not someone questioning you, but I don't know why I suddenly felt, wow, this feels quite pressurizing.
Sure. It must feel scary and anxiety ridden. But I guess the first thought that came up in my head, if like, okay, if you're concerned maybe somebody doesn't believe you, I first thought, oh, maybe you should tell as many people as possible. Then I thought, well, what is that going to do? I think really you have to tell people whose opinion that you trust and you can confide in mostly. And if possible, if you can tell the authorities, the tourist police, and recognize that they do have some legitimacy and ability to help you, and sincerity, right? So if you go around and you kind of tell people and they give you this, oh, did that really happen? You should probably stop there and try not to waste your time with them, because that's, I would say, a very dismissive attitude to take. Maybe they're not trusting your integrity or understanding, the position that you're coming from.
There's a level of denial as well, I think, tied in there, where people, not meaning to be rude, but like an ignorance as well, where people just can't fathom that. It's like Chiang Mai, for example. People can't fathom that these things happen here, because all they've ever heard is how safe this place is.
For sure.
And here's the thing, I don't want to put a scare into anybody, but this is something that kind of scared me when I was about 17 years old, 17 years old in college, and I was doing a uniformed services diploma with the military and law enforcement. regardless, I was spending some time in courts observing cases that were happening in my hometown, my home city. And it blew me away, some of the cases that I saw, because it was horrific. Some of the like violent altercations, murders, etc. Absolutely horrific. And what blew my mind at that time is I wondered, why don't people know about this? Why is this not in the newspaper? Why is it not on TV? And what I realized is, after seeing a few of those cases and looking at some statistics at that time, we're talking many moons ago, what's really going on does not reflect how it really feels of what's going on. In other words, people will get so locked into what the phone and what the TV is telling them is happening that they kind of neglect to realize that there's significantly more going on in every, I'm not just saying Chiang Mai, I mean everywhere, way more. It's not being reported publicly because that's all the news would be all day. There's so many examples of it. So it's one part of it is that people just, sometimes they just can't fathom it. They're like, well, hang on, nothing happens in Chiang Mai. Chiang Mai is safe. Yeah. It's like, well, yes, it does. Actually, it happens. If people actually saw the numbers in Chiang Mai, I think it would really shock them to the core. But if I show them those statistics versus another city like Bangkok, I think they would say, oh gosh, yeah, okay, Chiang Mai is significant safer than Bangkok, for example, because it is, stats do show that. But again, a lot of people, they can't fathom it because, again, they don't hear about it very much. They don't know people it's happened to. It may not have happened to them. So sometimes if something actually does happen, it's like, really, they can't believe it, and maybe initially they can't believe it. And then on your side, the person who it happened to, I would argue that you would have, rightly so, like quite kind of a hypersensitivity to everything around what's happening with this, including feedback, whether it be positive or maybe potentially taken or perceived as negative. It's like you can really feel it. And that voice in your ear that we talked about earlier, that thing's shouting like hell, because again, this is new territory and it's quite traumatic. So sometimes that can throw the kind of the doubts in your mind as well. But it might not be that way. It might be the people, they do genuinely care. They just have no clue. Or it might be that some people, they don't even allow themselves to go there. It's like, nah. And it's not even, it may not even be not believing you. It's just like not believing the whole thing. Like, now that can't happen. Some people just can't look at it and won't look at it.
Yeah. I think it's almost like I sort of had the thoughts of, is someone trying to sort of almost pacify it and not build it up too much more in your own mind as well, maybe like they care but they don't really know what to say, and then it's like, I didn't need that I mean, off the back of that, I spoke to you, Jamie, and your reaction straight away, it really, really empowered me. And I do believe, and I thank you immensely for this, that actually helped me process it a hell of a lot quicker than if it had just been, Matt was amazing, but when it's your one, your partner, your close person, it was like, that was like, you gave me a voice, and I will continue to thank you for that, because many people won't have that person there, rooting for them to try and help. And it's not necessarily that I need everyone to go, oh my God, what's happened to you? Are you okay? Because it's not like you're not looking for pity, are you, when something like this happens? But it's almost like you're looking for some sort of justice or acceptance that something has happened to you. And, it's nice to have support. But you do it in a certain way, and I'm sure you do, Sakan, as well. There's going to be people that will go, oh my God, you're not going out, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And actually, that's almost too far the other way. So you've got to, find the right people that can support.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for saying that, Sarah. I mean, knowing that, talking to me and me being able to help the situation, that it helped you through it, that's huge for me. So thank you. I really do appreciate that feedback. Yeah, it's really tough. I think I've thought of one more thing as well, is that sometimes people don't know what to say either. And I think that they give these kind of almost like pre-programmed responses because they don't know what to say. You know what I mean? They just don't know what to put forward. I think in this example with you, Sarah, with Sakan and myself, because of the nature of what we do and our own personal experiences, we know what that is. It's unfortunately, a lot of people who train with us, I'm really pleased they're doing it, but they're training with us because something's already happened to them and they don't want it to happen again. So they come to us and they tell us what's happened and the journey they go through. It's something. I think that for someone who's been through something like this, I think the most healthy thing you can do if you're looking to support someone like this is to be as true and as real as you possibly can be, not trying to appease or say something to make them feel better or bring comfort. I think that if your intent is good, that's the comfort, right? It's giving truth. Like in your situation, when I heard about it, it was fucking wrong. Excuse my language. It was wrong what happened to you, and you needed to hear that right away. You know, it's, I don't know if anyone else had told you, but that's what I was saying to you. Look, that is that. End of story. You know, it's like there is no voice on this one. It is what it is. You know, and I think that, yeah, when it's kind of direct like that, but not harshly, just truth, balanced truth, and not kind of beating around the bush or trying to do the right thing. I think that's far better for a person to help them process what they've been through. You know, just being there for them, being truthful with good intent, you know, not being too kind of fluffy about it.
Yeah,
you know,
are you okay? Because it's like that, are you
well,
okay? It's like that universal, like, you know, are you okay? And it's, you know, it goes in sort of waves in that initial, really it was like the initial week, that acute period. So initially when it first happened and I had that first feedback, it was like Matt had really supported me, then this, and it was like, I'm not going to tell anyone just yet. Then I told you, and obviously that empowered me. Spoke to my mum, and she was very similar to you. Like, she always pulls it out of the bag. My mum, she's like, well, what happened, and the facts, and then, you know, right, you and Matt go out together, etc., etc. And then I felt more comfortable to tell the close people to me. Now, when we look at like the trauma sort of cycle and what happens once you've been attacked or something traumatic has happened. Now, you've said sort of there's examples of people that join the school and they've already had something happen. Now, for me, the only thing that I sort of had, I guess, flashbacks on was I kept, because he had a black mask and a black helmet on, I could only see his eyes. And that sort of first week, I kept seeing just those eyes because they just came at me so quickly. And there was a guy at the swimming pool a few days later, and I was swimming up and down, and he was just looking in the pool, just a guy sitting there, you know, sunbathing or whatever. And he had similar eyes. And I just got out and I told Matt straight away, I was like, that guy looks nothing like the guy, but a similar sort of look. And, you know, then, you know, that was fine. I spoke to him about it. But is there certain things that you've come across that people would, you know, maybe have those flashbacks and things like that, and how you would, I guess it's hard to say how you deal with that, because ideally you would speak to someone about it. I don't know if there's anything else for coping mechanisms.
Sure. I mean, it really depends on the situation that's happened, but more on how you are responding to that situation, right? Of what's happened, or the trauma of what's happened to you. So the thing is that if something happens, as you're aware, the voices will pop up into the head, and all the doubts and everything else will come into play, and all this stuff will happen. I think, again, the first thing is trying very hard not to get consumed by the voices, and to try and feel what happened, right? Feel like what did you go through, right? And how you feeling about it. And any kind of external interpretations of that event are completely irrelevant. It's all about how you feel. So, for example, you can have two people from completely different walks of life go through the exact same traumatic event, and they can walk away from that feeling significantly different, depending on just how they are as a person, their characteristics, their own life experiences. So that doesn't mean that the event itself is any less or more. It's impactful, but some people will feel it different to others, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, it goes back into not overthinking it and feeling what you feel. I think from there as well, it's very, very important to allow yourself to process the feelings and not box them in and hold them in, and then allow your thinking brain to convince you of, you shouldn't do this because of this. If you're feeling it, you're feeling it, right? If you're feeling anger, you're angry. Okay, you need to allow yourself to kind of process that anger. If you're feeling sad, you're feeling sad. Feeling, and weird feelings can come up as well. You know, it's like you can have someone who you know has tried to attack you, and you've hit them and they've run away, and then later you feel remorseful for hitting them, and you think, what? But it is what it is. The feeling's there, it's there. It is, you got to let it come out, you know? So in terms of actually processing it, you know, seeing a person, a professional, whichever, I would say that, again, don't put too much stock in the event itself, you know, regardless of if it's what you may perceive to be a small event or versus a big event. It's all about how it's manifested inside you. And then if you feel as though you need to talk to someone close to you, I would say go for it. I would also say, if you're going to tap into your, let's say, your friends and family and your loved ones, if you have that one person that you can confide in and you feel comfortable doing so, and then they're a good support for you, I'd say go for it. But sometimes, like someone like me, I'm not very good in confining in one person. So instead, I find myself talking to 3 or 4, maybe on aspects of what I'm feeling or what I might be going through, and I'm kind of trying to create a conclusion based on the feedback I got from 2 or 3 people that I trust. For example, right? I think the last thing is about therapy. I think that people really need to consider that as a viable option, again, regardless of the situation they've been through. You know, it doesn't matter how it's perceived in terms of its severity, it's about how you feel. And a lot of people that when they're looking for professional help, they'll say to themselves, well, God, no, I'm not a weak person. It's not that at all. You know, you've been through something. You need someone to help you kind of reorganize those thoughts and feelings a little bit, you know? So it's a case of finding a therapist if you need to, just to get it out your system and allow that person who knows how to guide you through that process to just guide you through the process. The last thing I'll say on that point is that if you look for a therapist, find one, and they're not right for you, don't give up. And it's the same thing if you're talking to someone else as well, you know, it might not be a therapist. Don't like, oh, well, that didn't work. No, you need to keep trying on that one until you find the right balance, because you owe it to your bloody self. Ultimately, if you stop at the first hurdle, you're just going to internalize it, feel it, and it will manifest into your life. Whereas if you keep at it, stay strong, keep trying to find that solution, I believe it does present itself. It really can, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I really like what you said there, actually, because that's something my mindset has always been in my life when I've been through trauma. And, you know, this is close people in my life that have, you know, essentially tried to sexually abuse me, etc. And it's something I speak about on the podcast. For me, it's been cathartic to talk about it, and I understand not many people would want to visit in this nature, you know, things that are so personal. But I get a lot of listeners that actually take a lot of comfort from talking about these things. And I've never said it like this before, but it's coming out organically. I've always, makes me a bit upset actually, but I've always felt like because I haven't been raped or it's been that severe, I'm lucky because it's been lesser versions. I didn't think that was going to make me cry. But I really like what you said there about it's the severity to you, not anyone else. Fuck anyone else, really. Right. You know, it's if something has happened to you of whatever nature it is, if it's not right and it's upset you as a person, it's a message I put across in all different ways across the podcast. You know, you deserve a voice and you deserve to have help, and it's okay to ask for help, right?
It is 110%. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. And at the same time, you know, with like the likes of psychotherapy, trauma treatments, etc., it really has come quite a long way in the last, I'd say, couple of decades. It really has. So, you know, they can really understand what needs to be done to help you out, you know, and I think that why not, you know, because you can either just take that chance, give it a shot. And I think if you have, even if it's a smallest amount of willingness to give it that shot, that might just be enough. And then you'll find that being able to kind of process these things, it balances your life significantly better than as if you were to just go, no, I'm not even going to try. And you'll never know. And it's stuck there then. And like you said, you highlighted it perfectly. It's like, you know, first and foremost, if you feel you need help, you feel that something's not right, then that is reason enough to step forward and do something. You don't need to go any further in your thought patterns, you know, in your thought processes. Just go for it. That would be my best advice.
No, it's certainly something that, you know, there's so many things that can happen in life, and it is certainly, you know, a mindset that people do have. It's like, oh, well, it's only this that happened. Could have been a lot worse. But if that's worse to you, you know, you'll know, guys, what it's like if, you know, something happens like this and you don't deal with it. You know, there was that first week where I second looked at every single male that walked past me. So then, you know, if I wasn't in this really lucky position where I've got you guys to support me, Matt, and those people close to me, you know, what would happen if I'm alive for the next 40 years that I could never have a relationship again? I could never be near a male again because if that person decided to inflict something on me that I wasn't asking for. You know, it's crazy when you look at the mindset even in that regard, you know, something small can happen that could affect your whole life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
Mm.
it imprints, Sarah. I mean, it's something that's I'm not a, don't get me wrong, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a trauma specialist, but I've worked with trauma specialists. And one thing that really caught my attention, talking to the head trauma counselor of an addiction rehab several years ago, a guy I used to work with, he was explaining to me, and if I get this wrong, any doctors watching this, he'll forgive me, but he would basically break it down as small t PTSD and large T or big T PTSD. Fact of the matter is, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, people would think of it in terms of its more extreme examples where, you know, oh, you've escaped something which is potentially could have ended your life, or you've lost a loved one, or whatever it could be, a car accident, something, war. People think that, okay, that's PTSD, right? And it is, of course it is. But what that's doing is it's trauma that when you go through it, it makes an imprint and it's there, okay? Then you've got small t PTSD, which we all have. And those are arguably smaller, see you guys, arguably smaller events, or what you might perceive to be a smaller event. It still makes an imprint and it still feeds into your life day by day. And that can be something as small as a comment you might have received as a child at school. Something, you know, some kid being mean says something to you and you just felt it, and then it's in, and then you wonder, you know, as an adult, why am I still worried about this aspect of my appearance? That might be it, you know what I mean? It might be, and that's what they would call small t PTSD. So again, how these events affect you or how they affect you, that's why we can't be comparative against other people and what they might feel. Just can't do it that way. It's how it feels to you. So
Yeah, actually, something's just popping into my mind in regards to like the mindset and things that happen in the past. Now, as you know, there's going to be bodybuilders listening, and this could relate very nicely to what you've just said there, Jamie. When you go through, so you guys competing, similar to anyone listening that competes, if you lose a fight, if you have a bad experience in your, you know, after it, you think, fucking hell, I could have got that right hook, or whatever it is, you know, oh, I wish I'd stepped in a different way, or what have you. How would you guys combat that? This is a tangent, of course, but how would you combat that going back into a fight to go, you know, I can still win here if you've, you know, you lost in the past and you maybe doubt your own ability?
It's a good one for you, that, mate.
Yeah. It's, you know, first of all, just to relive the experience is difficult enough.
Yeah.
Even just, I always put my fights on videotape. I always have like the, you know, students or cornermen, they're always there to videotape the fights and the experience, because if I were to recreate the scenario just off of, you know, what I felt, it would not be the same experience, right? It would just be like, this happened then, and then time passed, and then next, you know, it was over. But after a loss, it's really hard to just like be non-biased about it and say, this is the reason why I lost, right? I could easily make the excuse, oh, he's a better man that day, or I was going through difficulties in my family life, or I didn't get enough rest. But reality is I'd have to be able to pinpoint it on something, whether it was a failure of me, my preparation, my footwork, I'm not approaching the game plan right. As soon as we can start to address that, then we can start to work backwards and say, okay, you know, here's the reason why I lost, and this is what we need to improve. And for a lot of people, that's difficult because they have to address, oh, I wasn't the perfect coach, or I wasn't the perfect athlete. You know, maybe you take a cop-out approach, say, oh, he was just better than me, right? No, we all have the ability to win, no matter what you know, kind of competition or challenges we face. Right? Because you know, if you're in the moment and you're focused, you can make things happen. So how can we put that in a self-defense mindset? What I like to do is I like to take the Cooper's colors codes and have people go back to their incidents that they've had in the past and try to codify the different states of awareness that they were in and the level of perceived threat that they were feeling. Right, so that way we can use the Cooper's colors codes: white, yellow, orange, red, and then you know, if not black as well, to figure out, you know, what could I have done better in that situation in the most non-biased way possible.
Yeah, which is the hard bit in itself, right?
Super, very super.
I feel like it is certainly, you know, a lot of what we've spoken about today, you know, expressing vulnerability and asking for help, and then having that objective mind to look at your own performance, look at your own trauma, look at, you know, the scenarios that have happened, and allow, you know, we all have ego. It is what it is, but allow that to drop off. And I certainly express how vulnerability and expressing that with the right people, the right support network, etc., you can excel as a person, you can grow as a person. And what you can also do is inspire other people that have maybe had similar scenarios. And I certainly feel like that's, you know, an undercurrent of what we've spoken about today, because we're human, you know, we're not bulletproof. And whether that's a performance, whether that's competing, whether you're out on the street for a walk, you know, we experience things in life and sometimes it's fucking shit. Do you know what I mean? You think, why has this happened to me? And that can defeat you, or like you say, you can look back at it and revisit it when it's appropriate and go, okay, let's be objective here. Let's look at this from, you know, not in that acute period where you're like, I've just lost a competition, that person's better than me, whatever else. And you need to facilitate growth by being able to look inside and be objective. But like I say, it's not easy for sure.
It's not. You have to be quite courageous to do it. You know, you really do. You know, you need to, it's a conscious decision to make. It takes a bit of courage to do it. You know, forgive my language. Don't forgive my language. It's appropriate. Yeah, I would say that for me, what works for me sometimes in many scenarios is what I call the fuck it mentality. Fuck it. Oh, you know, don't think anymore. Just go. Because that's when that tends to happen, where your gut will tell you something and then that works its way up to your head and then the voices start telling you something else. Sometimes what you have to do, it's like, you know what? Go, just go. Don't think, step forward, you know, and that is a very simplistic mindset, but there is beauty in simplicity when it comes to these kind of mindsets, you know. Otherwise, we can literally talk our way out of things, you know, with no good reason other than our brain trying to apply logic or scenarios that may not even exist, you know. It's just a voice. It's just going on where your gut is telling you the truth. So yeah.
Well, it's like those voices, isn't it, of when you approach something like this, you know, if something has happened to you in a traumatic experience, those voices of what if someone doesn't believe me, what if they do believe me, and then they're going to say, oh, you should have done this, or maybe everyone's going to empower me. There's so much that goes through your mind when you're dealing with what other people would think. But you gave that example earlier. Two people can have exactly the same scenario, but when they look at the scenario, it's completely different. And that goes with opinions, because everyone has different opinions. Now, probably a good way to end our session today would be, if someone is listening and, you know, maybe nothing has happened to them and they're thinking, well, actually, I'd quite like to visit this. You mentioned earlier, Jamie, about sort of walking into a combat school or somewhere that could offer, you know, some basic self-defense. Is there, because there's a lot of UK listeners, Australia and America as well, is there any sort of sources or places you could direct people to that they would actually look for this type of education?
No, that's a good question. Well, in the UK, there are some, I would say, research combatives organizations, combatives. So combatives is kind of it's a term that will cover sort of the overview of your self-protection, of your general safety. So it's not just focusing on one aspect, such as the physical side of fighting or this, that, and the other. Usually a good combatives gym or a good combatives school or program will look at the whole thing. And often they're looking at it more of kind of preventative measure. So here's the thing. My advice is, don't walk into kind of a martial arts school with the intention of, I'm going to learn how to physically fight, and that is where my safety lies. I think that it should be supplementary. Okay. So, you know, some people will go into, let's say, an MMA gym, which is actually a really good idea. I'm not going to use that example. I have to be careful which example I use now, don't I? I don't want to. Let's say boxing. Okay. Let's go umbrella. So boxing or kickboxing, you know, they'll go in, they're like, right, I can fight now. I'm good. Yeah, not quite, because as we've been talking about in the whole podcast, I think we've established now that there's far more to it than just a physical fight. And bearing in mind that you have to be a little bit savvy. If you're going into, let's say, a sport fighting gym, thinking, I'm going to learn how to fight, you're learning how to win a fight to a certain set of rules and certain method. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do those things. I would recommend you should do those things, because those are really important in terms of getting your fitness up, understanding your own body mechanics, your hand-eye coordination, and training yourself, your mind and your body, how to physically move and how to fight out of the situation, right? But you need the training. It's very important, or like the mental training of preventative measures, awareness skills, de-escalation techniques, planning in advance, setting your own kind of emotional boundaries, and all this stuff is really, really important. So that's where kind of combatives or self-defense schools can come in, because they will give you those, if it's a good school, they will give you those tools that are arguably potentially more important than the physical side of things, because really you don't want to be in that situation. So you want to avoid it and prevent it primarily. And that's a very, very important skill set to have. It's a lot of online material as well. We've got a lot of online material, and obviously there's a lot of very, very decent combative instructors and self-defense guys who really do know what they're doing, and they have plenty of content online as well. Just watch it with an open mind, because some of the content you'll see is garbage. So you might want to tread carefully and maybe put it past someone who does know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
But, there's loads of resources out there. There really is.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I think that, you know, again, people may listen and go, it's not for me, or there's a multitude of things that are going to go through your mind. Probably a similar mindset to me. I'm really busy, or I've got other things I need to do. Is there time to fit in some self-defense work? But hopefully, you know, what we've spoken about here, I do believe that if it was something, even as the example of online, someone could do that. You know, it's something I promote of an evening, chill out, have an ebook, have a book, do something. Yeah. You know, you could do something like that within, you know, a self-care regime if you're a bodybuilder or whatever. So I think that, you know, even that as a thought process, we're not saying you have to go and join a school and go every day, but, you know, maybe this will bring about just a thought process, hopefully. Now, if anyone does listen and, you know, they want to tag us on their Instagram stories, etc., I'll put the Instagram. Should I put the one that I speak to you on, Jamie, in the...
Yeah, that'd be fine. I was just about to say that, actually, is that, you know, we really are an open resource. You know, our primary concern is what we're doing in that training room, you know, getting people fit, ready to fight, keep themselves safe. So I would say that, yeah, if any of your viewers, anyone watching this, if they really do want some kind of direction or where they can go, you know, whether that's, you know, reading material or online content or whatever, then yeah, bring them our direction, Sarah. We'll more than happily refer to the right direction or give information if it helps people. So that's no problem. Yeah, we can do that.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, guys. What an episode. Yeah, I mean, we said before we hit record, it will go on many, many tangents and be organic. And we agreed that's the best type of listening. So thank you so much. And again, for your support for myself and what you're doing at the school. And if anyone does listen and wants to reach out, I'll put your Instagram in the description. So thank you, guys. And I will see you both soon.
Thank you, Sarah. Absolute pleasure talking with you.
Up on car.
Nicely done.
Thanks, guys.
Hey.